I'm Joel Wood, a senior analytics engineer at Seeq. Today, my colleague Spencer and I are going to walk you through a data-centric approach to both CPV and condition-based equipment reliability. These might seem like two separate topics, but if you bear with us, we're going to walk you through a way that you can manage both in the same environment using Seeq. More technical difficulties. We're really excited to show you all this awesome information. I'm not good at jokes. I'm not going to tell a joke. Nope, no jokes. All right, we got it. All right, sorry about that. So, what is Seeq? Seeq is an advanced analytics and AI platform, a software platform built for process industries. We were founded in 2013, have a team of over 250 with deep industry expertise. We work with over 40 global partners and over 270 clients in a variety of industries, including the pharmaceutical industry, of course. Seeq connects to both your time series and relational data for near real-time analytics. This can include a wide variety of analytics, including visualization and contextualization of data, modeling and machine learning, all the way to dashboarding and reporting, and much more. So where does Seeq fit into your analytics architecture? As I mentioned, we connect to both time series data, things like your process and equipment data historians, and your relational databases like batch and MES data or lab and LIMS data. Seeq queries this on demand in real time with no data migration necessary, either on-prem or over cloud services. On top of this data, this is where the Seeq SaaS stack sits. We have three main applications. Firstly, our Workbench and Python app, where your scientists and engineers can perform advanced analytics and modeling on top of those data sources. Then we have a reporting and dashboard tool where those analytics that your scientists are performing can be easily dashboarded and reported to, leadership, line management, et cetera. And then we have our enterprise monitoring app where you can easily scale these analytics across your assets and sites and do by exception monitoring. Across all of this, we have our premium AI, so our decision intelligence can query all of these analytics for rapid business insights with just the click of a button. This engine powers a lot of outcomes in the pharmaceutical manufacturing space, including product and process compliance and monitoring. Today, we're going to talk specifically about continued process verification and asset reliability by exception. And on the right here, you can see we work with a number of pharmaceutical clients, about 50% of the top 20 pharmaceutical businesses in the world. So now let's dig into CPV. At Seeq, we have a vision empowered by innovators in the space, all of you folks, that showing continued compliance should be an always-on process integrated approach that really leverages all of your years of design, development, all the way through qualification stage data. I myself, in my history, have worked in the tabular compliance realm. We work for years aggregating data, developing data packages, performing risk assessments. We get all the way to validation, which is an amazing feat for anyone that's been through that whole process. And then to show continued verification, we trend a few quality attributes, a few parameters in a spreadsheet. Maybe we paste them in a report and it gets signed off. And that's great. That might be what you need to prove continued verification of your processes and products. At Seeq, though, we believe that all of this design stage and development data should be used in real time to enable more efficient processing and provide more deep preventative action, real time before a problem occurs. We really don't want you to just verify with a static stamp of approval. We want you to continuously improve your organization to make better, higher quality products for your patients. So how do we get to this vision? Here I have a screenshot of a Seeq Workbench. So again, this is the platform where your scientists and engineers can really dig into the data, using point and click tools and modeling tools alongside. So this batch blueprint, on the top left-hand corner of the screen, highlighted in blue, you can see a couple columns that we're calling batches. These are different batches across a specific time period that could maybe represent different products. These we call capsules, essentially defined periods of time that hold some level of context. In this case, like you can see on the right-hand side, we have a campaign ID, batch ID, product code. This can also contain lot numbers, asset information, et cetera. And everything you see there on the right-hand side, all of those objects are exactly what you see on the trend view aligned, those objects. Underneath these batch events, once we've identified them, you can trend a variety of different signals. Here we have a process signal, a continuous process signal. We have some aggregated average data over our batches that we performed in Seeq. And we also have lab data, discrete lab data that we've aligned. All of this data can be aligned either by time or by context. And once we have that data aligned, that's when we can really perform some key analytics. In this case, I've organized all of this for a statistical process control approach, which is key for our CPV program. Now, I mentioned context a few times and probably will again. Building these context levels in early on can really help us scale these analytics, filter, and really roll up key metrics in these apps and in our enterprise monitoring app, which we'll get to. And one quick aside, we also offer Seeq for Pharma package. So this comes with validation-ready features like locking and versioning, a readable audit trail, and a controlled release cadence that can align with your quality management system, change controls, et cetera. So once we have this batch blueprint, then we can perform our SPC analytics on top. So I have another workbench view here. Again, not going to get too far into the weeds, but in the top left-hand corner, again, we can see we're looking at maybe one product and all the batches over a certain period of time. Here we can look at SBC in 2 dimensions. We can look at both intrabatch information. So here we have a temperature signal on the top, and then below we have a lab signal. So we can look at intrabatch lab data or aggregated averages, mins, maxes over your process or any signal you bring in. Right on this same trend, we can overlay SPC limits. So we've trained over a specific period of time. Here we're showing a plus or minus 3 sigma, and maybe some process limits or product limits alongside as well. And on top of this, then we can perform our limit logic. We can apply run rules or process-specific limit logic and really bring out events where we're out of trend or we're deviating from our normal control. All of these events can be flagged in real time to your SMEs, or you can feed it back into a design space model that you can bring in, or Seeq's machine learning tools to be more predictive and use your process footprint to understand when a problem might occur, not just when an event occurs, and then rush to the scene. On the right-hand side, in the same environment, we have our inline statistics tools. So here we can actually grab our data, separate it from time, and get a statistical footprint for maybe our process or product control. In this case, we've pulled out some dissolution data, maybe over a year, for this product that maybe we're looking at over a few months, and see how our recent performance compares to our year as a whole. And we can compare different products, different process lines, et cetera, using these statistics tools. So all of this really builds a framework for scaling analyses across products. In this case, we're looking at SPC. We can easily scale across our portfolio and assets and have these events triaged in our enterprise monitoring app, so you can really have a one dashboard area to look at all these events. So we've performed all our analytics. How does all of this information actually surface into our CPV program? So I'm going to show a few different parts. On the left-hand side, you have a screenshot of a report. So all of these analytics can be fed live in the same environment into reports, and these can be used as real-time dashboards or click of a button reports that you can maybe attach to an APR, et cetera. No more recreating analyses or rewriting reports every quarter, every year. You have a new person in the role and they have to recreate things. This is all automated. You can have templated, automated reporting. In the center, we have our enterprise monitoring app. So this is where we can surface all of these SPC and quality events for triaging, commenting, and applying other user comments and context. So here, we're not looking at all the space in between. We're only looking at when we have key events occur. And Spencer will get a little more into how we can use this tool for asset management as well. From here, your engineers, with the click of a button, can go deeper into the underlying trends, do modeling on top of that, or your management or leadership can use our AI tools. So again, something like summarize quality events by product in 2025. Again, this is connecting to all the analytics background that we put in there, that batch blueprint, and all the data we pull in. And it maybe can say, hey, this product is a key, it's the highest risk, we've seen the most events, this is what you should look into. So really all of this aligns with this decision intelligence CPV roadmap. We have an integrated analytics environment that drives meaningful quality insights so you can provide timely action across your portfolio. And CPV is just one piece of the picture. There are a lot of other outcomes in the pharmaceutical manufacturing industry that we can look into, including asset quality, management, and monitoring, which Spencer will talk about now.
Yeah, thanks, Joel, for the overview of CPV. And really what I want to do now is try to tie in the whole concept of AQM into CPV and how does that look, within a single platform approaching those two. So asset qualification monitoring, what is it really? Just verifying that your assets are operating in a qualified state. So those, acceptable ranges, operating limits typically set by your quality group. And what does that current workflow really look like? Well, it really starts with a lot of manual data compilation right now, right? Connecting to all your data sources, bringing in the data, trying to find all of that, and then really going through the data cleaning and everything. Then that goes into more manual data review and analysis. So really trying to understand are your assets operating in that qualified state, and then into reporting. But this whole cycle really goes around with your subject matter experts, at the core of all of this, doing this analysis at some periodic time period, where they're doing these steps regardless of whether or not your assets are in a qualified state. And so it's a really high effort, really manual process right now. And so what could this actually look like moving forward? We think that could look like asset qualification monitoring by exception. So what's the main difference here? Well, really a more automated real-time monitoring and data compilation. So connecting to your data sources, pulling all of that data in real time, cleaning it, taking that through a more automated data review and analysis process set up by your SMEs. So they go through, determine what those acceptable ranges are, figure out what the relevant analytics are, and then taking that into reporting. The great part about this is this is all happening in an automated nature. And so if there is nothing to report, if there are no exceptions, this just continues to happen with very minimal involvement from your SME. Then when exceptions actually do occur, your subject matter experts get involved. They take it through the root cause analysis, really understand what's causing those exceptions, and then going into the reporting process. And so what does this really take us from? It takes us from a more reactive approach where we're looking back in time. We're looking at our assets in the past, trying to understand, were we in a qualified state, to doing that more proactively, looking at that in real time, understanding that we are in a qualified state, and then when exceptions occur, we know immediately. Taking us from a more manual to an automated process. So that whole process of finding the data, going through the analysis, all of that happening in a much more automated way, hopefully reducing error and increasing operational efficiency, and really driving more value where we can have our SMEs spending more time on critical things that matter, and not spending time on tasks like these. It's also a more scalable process, so we can generate this for a handful of your assets and then scale those across your entire enterprise. So scaling this from a few assets to thousands of assets across an entire organization is very doable. And then really standardizing this AQM by exception workflow, continuing to make sure we're compliant with regulatory mandates. And so what's the bigger picture here? Much like Joel said at the beginning, CPV and AQM can seem like two very different concepts, but within a single platform, they can become very interrelated to each other. And so much like Joel talked about, CPV very focused on process performance and product quality. So we're monitoring those critical quality attributes. We're looking at those process parameters over the entire life cycle and trying to detect that drift and any variability in our process. Really making sure our process is where we want it to be and there's no increased variability there. And then generating insights and report views of that process, and making sure, we have a very robust process. AQM, on the other hand, looking more at qualified asset performance. We're monitoring those qualified assets against those validated limits, the operating limits, detecting those deviations from those operating ranges and making sure that we're always having our assets in a qualified state. And then when there actually are exceptions, generating the reports, the logs that are necessary for audit-ready compliance. And so what does this look like when you bring these two concepts together? Well, in the center of this kind of Venn diagram, it really leans into a state of control and asset reliability. So your equipment is reliable and your process is in control. And so this brings us to a state of always on CPV. We're constantly monitoring our process, understanding is there any drift, detecting that very early on before we're actually on our way out of control. And then AQM by exception, where we're monitoring our assets in real time, understanding that they are in a qualified state, and then knowing immediately when those exceptions occur. Bringing this into one unified system, really verifying our process and critical assets are in control, is a huge advantage. And then especially all the shared analytics between them, so all the conditions, the anomaly detection models, whatever you're applying to your analytics, all happening within a single framework across all of your processes and your equipment. really enables this more proactive evidence-based approach where we start to do, always on CPV. And then when we do have deviations, exceptions, things like that, we can quickly look into those, do the root cause analysis, and go through that process. And so what do the insights really look like as you build them from the bottom up here? Well, it starts from building those signals, conditions analysis. You may create a condition detecting, your temperatures, pressures, whatever process parameters you're looking at. We then build out the dashboards and reports to see when those out of specification events are happening in those dashboards and reports. We begin scaling those across all of your assets across your entire organization. So taking this from a handful of assets to a very automated enterprise-wide process, adding context and triaging those. So we document all those exception events. We notify the critical personnel and understand when our assets are actually out of a qualified state. And then really at the top of this, using our AI agents to compare operations by batch size, shift, whatever it might be over a long period of time to really generate those enterprise-wide insights. And what does this look like when your workforce is actually interacting with Seeq? Well, it starts with your operations, interacting with a process dashboard monitoring tool so they have a real-time view of your assets, understanding they're in a qualified state. Then whenever there is an event, that leading into your MSAT team, really flagging those events, notifying the targeted personas of what has occurred in the exceptions. Then leading into your MSAT team, going into more of that root cause analysis, those investigations, the deviations, understanding what happened, where are our problem areas in our organization. And then in the end, going to QA where they do the final review, flagging, reporting all of that, verifying that everything was fixed. And so what does this actually look like from how do we interact with Seeq in this way? I'm going to walk through a quick video and just kind of show you some of the capabilities of how does AQM by exception actually work. There we go. Okay. Is it playing? Okay. So here we're querying our agent queue here. We're asking it, which asset has the most events in the last 30 days, which condition is causing the asset to have more events relative to other assets. And so here we have a collection of data here. We have a lot of assets. We have reactors, exchangers. We have different conditions that are in there. So things like high pressure events, high temperature events, whatever it might be. We have some other data in there, like when did the events start, when did they end, what's the duration. And then we also have some other kind of very process-specific data in there. What product were we producing? 1, 2, 3. What phase in that process were we in? So we're feeding in product A, we're feeding in product B, whatever it might be. And you see Agent Q going through here, querying hundreds of events here. You could very easily scale this to thousands of events, generating the high-level insights so we know where to start with our root cause analysis. So here we see reactor 1 at 120 events in the last 30 days. Looks like that's kind of our problem area. It's above the rest of the reactors and more than the exchangers. And then we asked it, okay, what is causing that critical difference? And it says, okay, the high temperature condition seems to be the problem in this asset. So we're going to go ahead and drill into that data. Close out of this. So we'll begin sorting by the asset here and the condition. And we drill into reactor 1 here. We see we have more high pressure events than high temperature events, but when we look at the other reactors and what our agent told us about, it really seems like high temperature was the issue because there were more of those events. So we look into the quick trend data quickly here. We look at some of these events here, and you can see those kind of like purple bars there. When we click on one, we see, okay, our high temperature events are happening when reaction B in product 1 is being produced. So that seems like our problem area. We can kind of quickly go in, add some notes on this condition, notify the critical personnel. So, notify Joel, myself here, and say, let's review this high temperature condition for reactor 1, understand what's going on here. We can go ahead and flag that event as well and add, some labels to it, validating what's going on here, documented model maintenance, whatever it might be. We go ahead and submit that. And then really what we see here now on the table is we're beginning to add more and more context to these events so we can kind of group them by, what they are. So we flagged them, we're validating them. Now maybe we went through, we fixed that condition, we figured out what was going on. So we go ahead and check that as reviewed, add any further context we would like here. Also while we're adding all this context, this can all be added back into the workbench view that Joel was showing in the beginning. So the context is very much linked to the original data too. And then we can go ahead and, after we've reviewed everything, we can sort by not reviewed. We see our high temp condition goes away. We can kind of continue going through this process of triaging these other events that we've had over the last 30 days. Finally, what do you really want out of this is, reporting in the end to say, okay, what happened? So we go ahead and create a report with our agent queue, documenting the events over the last 30 days. And as an example, while that's generating, here's an example of what the report could look like. Reactor 1, how many events occurred over the last 30 days, what was our problem condition, and then a number of plots here about those conditions, and then an exception log at the end showing really what were the critical areas and the issues that we had. And if we go back here, Agent Q is generating this. You can see in less than a minute, it's able to generate a report here. The other benefit is you can give it a very specific template. You can say, follow my template to make sure that it's generating a report in the exact way that you'd like. But here, separates the events by condition and the events by asset and all of those things as well. So hopefully what you've seen here is that this is really capable of tying together these critical concepts of CPV and AQM by exception, and although they seem like two different concepts, really, doing them within the same platform really drive your in-process control as well as your asset reliability, all leading toward increased product quality in the end. So with that, we'll take any questions.